EDClass Limited. Breaking barriers to learning.
Hello and welcome back to EDClass's podcast. Today we are joined by Dyslexia assessor, teacher, author and speaker Rees. Joe has extensive experience in the education sector and in particular dyslexia and supporting SEND requirements. Today we'll be discussing dyslexia, what it truly is and its challenges, and how we can support those who struggle with it and assist with their well-being. Joe, so thank you for being here. Can you talk a bit about what you do and your company, basically?
Yeah, so I'm Rees and I live on the Isle of Wight, and I run a very small company called Another Way Round Dyslexia Support. And what I kind of deliver changes all the time depending on what people need. I'm very much kind of a needs-based company, I guess. But the main thing I do is assessment of dyslexia. I can assess and diagnose dyslexia. And I also go in and out of schools and deliver in-service training. More recently, I've been going into workplaces and doing dyslexia awareness talks to help make them more aware of what dyslexia looks like in the workplace, because there are lots of undiagnosed people with dyslexia out there. And then I do quite a lot on social media as well to raise awareness.
Excellent stuff, yeah. No, I know I've seen a lot of what you've been doing on social media, seen me speak at some events and that whatnot. And my colleague actually linked a good video you did the other day, which we're going to talk about a bit more in depth in a sec. But just first talk to me about dyslexia as a whole, and what actually is it? How challenging can it actually be to live with it, and how can it affect children with their development?
This is such a difficult question to answer really quickly, and I always get stumped on it, and it's crazy because it should literally trip off the tongue what it is. But basically, we think of dyslexia as difficulties with reading, spelling and writing. And that is what dyslexia is, but we struggle with reading, writing and spelling because of cognitive functions that make those things difficult. So for example, if we've got weak phonological awareness and weak short-term working memory, that's going to impact how we're able to learn to develop reading and spelling skill. So we now sort of refer to dyslexia more as a spectrum of difficulties. So it's not just made up of one thing, it's made up of lots of things that impact reading and spelling development. But what I would say is that dyslexia is so much more than just difficulties with reading and spelling. It spills into everything you do. Quite often, there's a misconception that when you leave school, it won't impact anymore. And I think when you leave education, coping as an adult with dyslexia is a whole different skill set. For me, if you can understand dyslexia and how it manifests itself in you, and it is slightly different for different people depending on the point it was identified, the support that they've had, their experiences. But actually, if you understand how dyslexia manifests itself in you, it's much easier to find a way around it, not to overcome it because it's always there, but to kind of manage it, if you like. I think if you don't understand what dyslexia really is and how it's showing up for you, that's when it becomes much more of a barrier.
No, yeah, that's a very good definition, I think. It's quite complex, isn't it, dyslexia? I always get quite confused about it, what it actually means. But we do have a few students on their class who actually have dyslexia and how difficult it can be to live with it.
Yeah,
But,
I think the other thing to say is like so often lots of the neurodiversities overlap. So if you've got one learning difference, so I prefer to talk about dyslexia as a learning difference rather than a learning difficulty, because I can learn, but I need you to teach me in the way that I learn, and I need to play to my strengths, if you like. I think quite often they overlap, and if you've got one, the chances are you're going to have a little bit of another one, which is why it's kind of different for all people really, and it is complicated for sure.
No, 100%. As you said, yeah, those neurodivergent challenges, there's a lot of them, isn't there? Especially cropping up recently. It's just accommodating those needs, isn't it? What we found is best supporting their strategies by identifying what they truly need. Just going on from that, what strategies do you suggest when you go in, and assessing and into the schools? What do you suggest?
It really does depend on the age of the child and the situation. So, for example, if we're thinking about primary school children, then we're still really going to be wanting to look at developing reading and spelling skill. With secondary school students, we are still going to be looking at developing spelling and reading skill, but it's going to be more about accessibility and how we can use technology to bridge the gap between potentially weaker literacy skill and actual underlying ability. So, for example, it's really looking about what sets a young person needs to be in, because just because they've got dyslexia doesn't necessarily mean that they should be in a lower set, because actually that might not be where their underlying ability is. So it's about looking at dyslexia within the individual rather than kind of a one size fits all. I mean, there are general things that work for people with dyslexia, but for example, thinking about kind of limiting our language, not overloading working memory, using visuals to support where you can, providing handouts in advance, or kind of a structure of a lecture or lesson so that they can kind of fill that in rather than have a blank piece of paper and start from scratch. But it really does depend on the person and the situation and the environment that they're in as well. I think if you're in the environment is everything. If you are in a supportive environment with people that get you, you're probably going to need a lot less adaptations. Whereas if you're in an environment where people just don't get it and just aren't interested, it's going to be much more challenging to find a way around.
Yeah, no, 100%. Couldn't agree with more there about having that comfortable environment actually really does help them, doesn't it? It helps boost their confidence as well. It's probably good to have those visual aids as well. What we found, a lot of the students learn online. They can learn better visually instead of just focusing on the words aspect. So yeah.
I mean, I quite often say for kids revising for GCSE, but I mean for degree courses and things as well, using YouTube videos where you can. There is so much content in terms of video now, particularly things like maths processes. If you can find a really good YouTube video of maths processes, it means you can really nail it, because you can pause it, you can make sure you've understood the first step before you go on to the next step. So yeah, video is really powerful for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. Myself included, I feel I would learn better from actually looking at a video. It's quite weird because I am used to reading all the time, but I think, especially in the digital age, looking at a video is definitely more
It's
helps me more.
interesting though, isn't it? Because I mean, like, AI is obviously a real hot topic at the moment, and it is incredible in terms of it is incredible and magical what it can do, and it for sure is the key for lots of people. However, just done a video for social media this morning because I can never get it to answer my exact question. Does that make sense? You need to know what to ask it, don't you, to generate the right stuff to kind of come out, if you like. So yeah, I think there's lots of work to be done around that yet.
No, that's another topic, but AI is definitely, it could be very
Yeah.
beneficial in the future, couldn't it? I saw on your social media, speaking about that my colleague actually sent to me. It's about the Erlen syndrome, was it? I was very interested about this. Could you just explain to everyone about what it is and how that can actually impact learning as well, and what
Yeah,
strategies you can maybe do to improve that?
yeah. So Erlen syndrome is kind of the American name for it. It's kind of been trademarked, I think, or copyrighted by Helen Erlen in America. In the UK, we tend to refer to it as visual stress. But basically, it's when one of the misconceptions around dyslexia is it is letters and words moving around, and that isn't dyslexia. That's actually Erlen or visual stress. And it's to do with the exact science, I believe, is to do with the white, like being all of the colors of the spectrum. So what overlays do, or colored filters, is they filter out the color that kind of bothers you. And it's interesting, if you try out different colored overlays, you will find that some are better for you than others. And some overlays almost make your disturbances even worse. So if again, there are two kind of slightly different routes. So if you were to go down the Erlen route, you would be looking to get coloured overlays. And if you wanted to get the glasses, you'd need to see an Erlen diagnostician. And Erlen glasses tend to be filtered more like sunglasses. So they filter out the colours that you don't like, but the world still looks how it should look, if that makes sense. Whereas you can go down an optician's route, down the colorometry route, and they will still do this a similar sort of overlay test to find out what color you need, but the glasses will be made up of a block color, so it's much more difficult to wear them all the time, because if you had pink glasses you would literally be seeing the world through rose tinted glasses, like it. So that's the slight difference between those two things.
Right, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So it just kind of blocks out the one color so you can make you focus a bit better.
Yeah.
Kind of
And
interesting.
well, basically, it's not necessarily to do with focus, it's to do with getting rid of the visual disturbances. It's getting rid of, and it's not just words moving around. So, for example, one of the symptoms is all of the white for some people kind of creates like rivers in a page, kind of like, so all you can see is kind of like the white river rather than the words. For some people, it's just blurry. But it's recommended that if you are kind of think you have got visual stress, you need to start with a proper eye test first of all, to just rule out that there's nothing going on like medically, physically with your eyesight, and then you can begin to look at the overlays.
I think I need to go for another eye test soon. I only noticed it about, I think about the end of sixth form, I started noticing my eyes going really blurry at times, but
Yeah.
that is interesting, that Erlen syndrome. It's interesting to find out, there are different conditions out there that need to be supported as well. So
I mean, I'm not, and there are real experts in the UK on it. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there are some real experts. There's one I follow on LinkedIn. So yeah,
no,
check
that
it
is
out,
interesting.
find out more.
No, will do. And then in terms of overcoming the challenges that come with dyslexia, talking about the mental health and well-being aspect, how important is that we support children to overcome that aspect? Their confidence might be deteriorated because they can't read as well as their peers or something like that. What strategies can we do to help support them to overcome that aspect?
I mean, I think it's really important that people, I personally don't like to hear dyslexia referred to as a superpower. We've all got strengths, and it's about kind of tapping into those strengths. And actually, to tell kids that dyslexia is a superpower, but it means you're going to struggle with all of these things, to me feels a bit kind of double-edged sword, if that makes sense. I think for me, if we're looking at confidence and self-esteem, again, it's about children with dyslexia really understanding what that actually is. And yes, you're going to find X, Y, and Z difficult, but actually, where are your strengths? And you're possibly going to be really good at this instead. I work with parents quite a lot, and I've also got 3 dyslexic children myself. And I think it's about finding what it is they're really good at and really encouraging that to help keep self-esteem high. So, if you think at school, that empties their self-esteem bucket because they're constantly struggling or asked to do things that they don't naturally find easy. Whereas actually, as parents and outside of school, we can really kind of tap into their strengths and make sure they experience success. There's so much I could say about mental health, and I know we haven't got very long, but for me, I think some of the issue is the actual curriculum and the school system itself. We're living in an exam-based system where we know that people with neurodiverse, not just dyslexia, don't function well in exams, yet that's the grade that measures potentially what job you're going to be able to get going forward, because you have to hit that certain criteria in maths and English. So you end up with kids that are potentially super intelligent, not fulfilling their potential because they haven't got the grade in particular areas. And then there's the issue of class sizes being too big, the actual curriculum knowledge question mark, is that actually suitable in terms of, do we need to know everything that's in the curriculum? So for me, it's looking at the moment at what we can do to work around that, because we can't change the system, we can't change that it's exam based, but what can we do to support our children to find another way around it? But I think for sure, if dyslexia isn't identified and it isn't supported, then you end up with high levels of anxiety and ultimately mental health difficulties.
Mm. No, yeah, I totally. Obviously, there is a massive focus on getting the best attainment scores, isn't there? But
Yeah.
obviously, Ofsted in the inspection handbook, it says preparing them better for adulthood as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you need to do that to raise confidence.
Yeah, and I think so often individual teachers, and they do it with the best intentions, but they don't look at students holistically. So, I've had two children go through GCSEs now, and every teacher is pushing in every subject for them to get as high as they possibly can so it looks better on the league tables. And I get that. But at the same time, for some children, certain subjects might not be their passion and might not be the thing that they're really good at. Now, that's not that I haven't got high expectations, but actually, it might be that there are other subjects that they would rather focus on and try and get a higher grade in. Do you see what I mean? Interestingly, my daughter's GCSEs ranged from 8s down to 4s because we really did that. We worked out where she needed to excel her energy, because actually, if she'd have excelled the same amount of energy in all subjects, she'd have been burnt out. So I did, all the kids that I work with, not just my own kids, we do that coaching of actually where do we need to, what matters to us, what do we need to make our next step. So yeah,
I think, yeah, I agree with it. The curriculum probably does need a bit of a redesign, doesn't it? Just to be able to allow children to focus on what they're good at, because at the end of the day, when you leave school, you do focus on what you're good at, don't you? So,
yeah,
and obviously you need the fundamental skills, but you just need to be able to implement that best
yeah.
support. Going back onto you being that you've got 3 kids, to the parent aspect, how important is that? Parents getting on board, having that triangulated approach with the teachers and the schools to overcome some barriers.
I think it's really important because teachers can only do so much. Like I get frustrated at times that teachers can't do more, but I came from a classroom and I know how much training you don't have as a teacher, if that makes sense. And also, I think particularly since the pandemic, teachers have got such a tricky job because the breadth of need in a class is massive. So I think it's about being really open with the school, asking the school what they can do and how they will be supporting your child, and then you as the parent taking some responsibility and plugging some of those gaps. So it might be that you need to get a bit of tuition, it might be that you need to do extra support or extra help with them at home. So yeah, for me, it's about, what I love to do is empower parents so that they feel like they're in control. So often parents feel like they don't have the skills to be able to support their children. And if you think dyslexia is hereditary, so quite often the parents I work with have not necessarily had positive experiences at school themselves. So it's not projecting that experience onto their own children, so that it becomes unhealthy, if you like, because our children are not us. But at the same time, feeling brave enough to have the conversations and know what you can change and what you can't change.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, what we found is having a constantly review process with the parents as well can really go a long way to helping that child in their development. Yeah, just one more final one for you this afternoon. In terms of edtech, online learning, basically what we do, it's boomed massively, especially since the pandemic. How beneficial do you think it can be with someone for dyslexia, especially if you have that right support embedded?
What, online learning?
Yeah, potentially online learning for someone who might be struggling with their confidence or even the learning
Yeah,
aspect as
I
well.
mean, it for me, there's a real shortage of specialist dyslexic teachers. So being able to, I did teaching through the pandemic, actually being able to access kids in areas where there aren't specialist dyslexic teachers online, it's hugely beneficial. And I'm a big fan of tutoring at the right time for the right people. I think it's very key that you find the right person to do it. It's quite a fine balance because you don't want to give them more of the thing that they're finding difficult necessarily. So it's about picking your battles and knowing when tuition might be needed to just kind of pick them up a bit. And knowing actually there will be times where tuition isn't necessarily going to make much difference. But I think one-to-one teaching for sure is bound to build confidence because you're picking errors up really quickly. You can get to know the children really well. I mean, that's one of the issues with bigger class sizes, is you can't possibly know all of the quirks of the kids to the level that you need to know them to make the difference. There's only so much you can do. Whereas one-to-one tuition, or even small group tuition, even I've done groups before with up to 6 children or 3 children, you can just get to know them much better and just really target the specific things that they're struggling with. So yeah, I think online learning is really powerful.
No, yeah, definitely. We found that it can be really transformative for children, but we just got to find that balance between making sure they don't get too comfortable with just being online all the time, because they need that social balance, don't they?
Yeah.
Getting into with the peer-on-peer
Yeah.
access as well, don't they? So, but yeah, Jo, was there anything else you wanted to say, or where can people go and find more information about you and
Oh
what you
yeah,
do?
so you can find me on all social media platforms at Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees. My website is currently another way around. I'm changing that soon, but yeah, no, I'm on all social media platforms at Dyslexic Life with Jo Rees. But thank you for inviting me along.
You've been great, Jo. Thank you very much. All right, all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant, Jo. Thank you. That was amazing. Yeah, that was
It's all right. What you needed?
Yeah, it's great. So yeah, what we'll do, if you're happy, we just post it out on YouTube.
Yeah.
Did you want to listen to it back, or just happy
No,
to
I
go
think
for
that's
it?
fine.
Cool. Yeah, that's it then. Thank you very much.
Cool.
What you got for the rest of the afternoon then?
I've got to finish writing this report, and I've got to go and collect a child from school who's currently refusing to wait for the school bus because she finishes an hour before the.
So a great conversation with Jo there in supporting dyslexia. If you found this interesting and you would like to find an online alternative provision solution for some of your students, contact EDClass on 01909 568 338 or email mail@edclass.com. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify accounts for more upcoming webinars and podcasts.
EDClass Limited. Breaking barriers to learning.